Okay, this lecture we are going to talk about the various different types of behavior change models and theories. And some of these you might have learned in previous classes, but we're just going to hone in on a few that we really think will help you as a health and wellness coach. So let's start off with the objectives for this part of your lecture, right? The objectives are first to describe the 5 stages of change outlined in the trans-theoretical model of behavior change. That's probably the one you're most familiar with. Second, we want to recognize a client's readiness to change and tailor your coaching strategies accordingly to their readiness to change. Third, we want to explain the concept of self-efficacy and how it relates to behavior change. Fourth, you're going to learn about and be able to describe the key constructs of the health belief model. And then lastly, you should be able to discuss how autonomy, relatedness, and competence influence motivation through the self-determination theory. So previously in other lectures, we kind of talked about how we have this big issue with chronic diseases and that many of them are related to lifestyles. So it's important that we understand that lifestyle choices are complicated. You know, truthfully, if it were an easy thing, then our field probably wouldn't exist. So lifestyles evolve for various reasons over a long time. And people who behave the way they do are doing so because those behaviors currently work for them, right? And health behaviors are shaped by a myriad of factors. And so what you're going to learn in today's lecture, or this series of lectures, is really how these health behaviors are shaped and the different models and theories that kind of go behind why we behave the way we behave. So let's go ahead and just start off with a basic definition of what health behavior is. Health behavior refers to behavior related to or affecting health. And oftentimes in health coaching, we like to think of health in a holistic fashion. And the concept of holistic health really extends beyond just our physical well-being and just beyond the absence of disease. And again, in kinesiology, I think we do a really good job of teaching you all about the physical well-being. But really, this class is to help you understand more than that. And for you to understand that your clients care more about than just their physical well-being, right? So holistic health really involves treating your client as the whole complex human being that they are, right? So it includes their body, their mind, as well as their relationship with their community. So there's kind of 2 primary ways of thinking about it. And there's the biomedical kind of perspective, but then you also have this biopsychological or psychosocial. So primarily when we first started as a medical field, people were looking at it from a biomedical model. And essentially what that says is it's going to focus on the physical causes and symptoms of disease and other health problems. And many medical settings are still very much in this biomedical model. Now, the biopsychosocial model incorporates the interplay between biology, psychology, and then social well-being on health. So the biopsychosocial model is the one that's probably more aligned with how we're trying to treat health and wellness today. Because we try to treat some of these factors from the biomedical model, which is very medicalized, but what we started to realize is that, again, people are more than just their physical well-being, right? People have psychological things going on, their social well-being matters. So this biopsychosocial model is really kind of where the foundations of why we do what we do in health and wellness coaching. So there's this thing called the ecological perspective, and one of the things you're going to want to do as a health coach is to use this ecological perspective to help guide your client to where they want to be. So it's important that we always consider our client's behavior in the context of a larger environment. So when you're working with a client and they're telling you about what they're doing and their behaviors, you need to understand that those behaviors aren't happening in a silo. Those behaviors are happening as a result of many things, right? So that's part of this ecological perspective. Their behaviors are a result of the relationships that they have, so their friends and families and peers that are around them. Their behaviors are a result of the rules and regulations and policies that surround them. Their behaviors are a result of the community and how it's designed, what their current social networks are, and then the beliefs within that system or those systems. Their behaviors are also a result of social and cultural norms. And then lastly, their behaviors are a result of economic structures, right, of which they live. So as you can see in this ecological perspective, it really takes this broad stroke of hey, our clients aren't acting in this silo, they're acting as part of a system that exists around them. And that system consists of many things. So the ecological perspective views health and health behaviors from any individuals as functions of not only their decisions as an individual, right, and their actions as an individual, but also the actions and decisions of the environments of where they live, right? And that's going to include the people, organizations, the communities, and even the cultural and social norms that influence and have an impact on them, right? So it's not just the individual, it's all of these things that surround them as well. And so this is a nice visual of what this kind of ecological perspective includes. So at the very bottom in purple, what you have is individual characteristics. And let's take health behavior change. So we know that individuals are going to have certain food preferences. They're going to have some generic inheritances. They're going to have some genetic physical things that are happening, and even some individual psychological characteristics. But then we also know that that individual is around friends, right? They have close relationships with friends and family, and those relationships are going to influence the eating habits that they have, right? Or the physical activity habits that they have, even some of the psychosocial health that they might have, right? How they view their body, or potentially even their anxiety and depression, right? So how their close relationship acts around them is going to influence them as an individual. And then the next step, right? We know that that individual lives within social networks. So what is their community doing? What's their school environment doing? What's their work environment doing, right? If we're thinking about nutrition, an example of the social network is, think about during the holidays, right? And someone goes to work, within their work social network, usually you have tons of sweets and unhealthy foods that are around them. So again, it's not just individual, it's close relationships and then also social networks. And then kind of one tier above is you have this built environment, right? And so those are the structures of neighborhoods, cities, locations, what's around them. And so maybe some of you have heard of a term called a food desert. And that's this idea that someone lives in an area that's really far away from fresh food, so fresh produce, right? Things that are healthy. So if someone lives in a quote unquote food desert, their built environment is not set up in a way to support that individual. You also have the government regulations and supports. So these are factors that influence food prices and availability. And a great example of this are subsidies that our government has on different foods, right? So one example of that in the US particularly is the subsidy it has on soy, okay? And then the next level up there is social and cultural norms and expectations. So what are people customarily eating? And that has a lot to do with where you live. It has a lot to do with your cultural norms, your cultural background, your family, okay? So all of these big picture things are essentially aiding and assisting the individual in the behaviors that they're engaging in. So in addition to understanding how an ecological perspective facilitates understanding of types of health behaviors, it's also really important to understand what positive psychology is. And health coaching is rooted in understanding how to empower people in the process of lifestyle behavior change, and is intrinsically tied to this field of positive psychology. In other words, you are going to be using this underlying idea of positive psychology in all of what you do as a health coach. So positive psychology is a scientific study of valued subjective experiences, which include well-being, contentment and satisfaction, hope and optimism, and flow and happiness. It was developed in the late 1990s, and it really moves away from focusing on thinking of an individual as having deficits, thinking of an individual as, oh, we have to fix them, and more towards thinking of an individual from their strengths and how can we utilize their strengths to help them achieve the goals that they want to achieve. So let's pause here and do a quick learning recap. The first question, what's the difference between the biomedical and biopsychological models? Second, what are the different levels within that ecological perspective, and how do you think they play a role in health behavior? And then third, what does the term positive psychology refer to? Go ahead and stop, take some notes, study a little bit, and I'll see you for the next lecture.